Game mechanics involving cold weather.
And welcome. Today, the star of the show is cold weather. And specifically, I've got some cool ideas out of this book, the Old School Dungeons & Dragons Wilderness Survival Guide. Now, this is not a very thick book. Back in the day, they didn't overwhelm you with a whole lot of pictures, but they gave you a lot of cool, applicable charts and information that you could use for the game. And that's exactly what I kind of glanced through here. And it got me to thinking about cold weather.
Taking a stroll, it's so cold I can barely speak. Taking a stroll here through the woods, going down this path here between a couple of fields on my way. And I was just thinking about how the weather is perhaps one of the most powerful foes you can throw at a group of PCs. A very easy way to thin out the PCs is simply to throw some good old-fashioned nature at them. A freezing cold day like this, as evening falls, is just one of many ways to do it.
So that's something we can kind of look at, because we like to throw monsters and things of this nature, complex puzzles, dungeons, but oftentimes we overlook the damage and the mayhem that can ensue if we just simply use the weather against our characters. Now, I'm not suggesting anything that I discuss in this vid today is something that you on a regular basis throw everything at them. You're always considering the temperature. You're always considering all these kind of things. And this can be overwhelming, and of course it's not fun if you do that. But these are just things to consider on an individual basis, or you can put a few together. Your player's a little something different to deal with. You might want to weaken them down before they take on the next obstacle. Or you may want to do a scenario where actually the main goal is simply to survive a winter storm. You know, you could go any direction with this, but these are things to consider when dealing with cold weather. I made a little list here for myself. How tough a character is, whatever stat you're using. These are things to consider. So a weaker character, or one that doesn't have as high tolerance for certain things. Okay, so a barbarian, for instance, you wouldn't really expect to have a huge amount of problem with cold weather, at least at first. Damage from exposure. Perhaps after they're exposed to the elements for a bit, then maybe each round or each turn or whatever time system you're using, maybe this will add up and they'll take a certain amount of damage after so long on a regular basis. How about the character's equipment? That's something to consider. The character's clothing, their armor, what they have in their backpack, what they have, for instance, a sword or even a bow, their weapons themselves. Freezing temperatures, your bow may pretty well snap. Your sword may break easily upon impact. What about the potions in your backpack? What about glass vials? Anybody have any chopstick? Character's movement is something to consider. That could mean the snow on the ground makes it more difficult to traverse the terrain. Or even if there's no snow, but it's still cold, that can have an effect on a character as well, affecting their joints and their breathing. You know how difficult it is to breathe outside when the weather is really cold. Rest, frostbite, hypothermia. How about sound, vision, perception in general? If it's a cold winter's night, it's a lot more difficult to see. Maybe it's snowing a little bit, maybe it's not snowing at all, but you've still got that gray overcast. Maybe it's the middle of the day. But all these things should be considered for perception, and they can greatly make things difficult for your players. Oh yeah. A slight breeze or even the wind. And you add all these small elements together, even a light snow can really affect vision and even sound. Maybe you've been outside and taken a walk in the winter woods before. You can actually hear the snow falling. It's a beautiful, beautiful sound. It's very eerie too. That can be difficult for your players. So their perception in general could be affected. Smell, sight, sound, even touch. If your characters try to use a skill or do an action, that would be modified by cold weather as well. You can imagine different ways you could apply that. Jumping would be different. Climbing would be different. Just attacking in general could be hindered greatly. Wearing armor, the effects of armor, leather armor even, metal armor, chainmail, plate mail, whatever the case may be. Let's peek through some of the video I shot the other day walking through the woods, and we can kind of consider how this can inspire different elements of play.
Okay, use your imagination here. This can just give you some ideas of how you can use cold weather against your player characters. So it's winter, there's water, that could lead to a whole set of problems right there. There's some ice, characters could fall through, perhaps they could fall through and get washed downstream under the ice. Slippery slope, someone has to climb up a tree. Oh boy, dex check. Icicles. Think of the jagged icicles that someone may have to go through an ice troll cave.
Okay, I guess it's recording.